Start. I created a blank project in uh, 426, and this one is set up for some other features, but essentially it could be just a blank blueprints project. And then I want to go to File and New, and I'm going to create a level from scratch. Okay? So this is just a grid. This is my viewport, right? Everyone's already gone over the interface of the game engine. I even reset the layout. This is the vanilla layout that you get when you start off. We can obviously, everything can be torn apart and refactored, and we can get to that another time. But for our sakes, intents and purposes, I have a list of things I want to do, and we're going to jump into them. So I'll talk about some other stuff next week. Next week. Okay, so let us first of all do the landscape tool. So right here on the top is you see a thing called modes, and we're normally in select mode. And that's where you're going to be 95% of the time when you're playing with the game engine. But for right now, we're going to make a landscape. So let's landscape it up, and then all of a sudden I have a terrain. You see, it's kind of like there's grids upon grids. What we could do is using the details on the left side, we can come up with the size of the playing field and also the resolution of the playing field. Now, you want to watch out. You don't want to do more than you need. Like if this is going to be a very small world, make a smaller landscape. The more geometry you add in, the more performance issues you have to deal with. So no bigger than you need it to be. The ultimate kind of note to make right here is this overall resolution is in meters. So this is a 500 meter world right here. All right. So I'm going to keep it in the center, and I'm going to keep everything normal. This section size is kind of about the resolution within the size of the thing. So you see this brings down less quadrants, brings down the overall resolution too. But for right now, this is fine with me. We'll just go ahead and create this world. So now I have a landscape. Right? This is the world's largest chessboard, right? But you see, I have a tool right here. By creating a landscape, it's now moved over to this new brush tool, right? It says sculpt right here. And I have a tool that has a strength, just like Photoshop. This is 3D Photoshop. I have a brush size. You can see as I expand it and contract it, my brush size goes in and out. And then tool strength, meaning that if I have 0, the tool will have no effect, and 1 will be as powerful as possible. And fall off means that there's 2 circles, one in the center, one on the outside, and the fall off is how drastically the strength of the tool falls off to 0 off the edge. Cool. So what happens when I use this tool is that it paints mountains. It's a little hard to see, so I'm going to sneak over here and add in a light, just so we can see some shapes. There you go. So now you can see I'm painting in a mountain range. And this might take me a while because it's a really big space, so I'm going to make my tool maybe a little bit bigger so that I can paint like some edges. And you see, like, the strength is about how quickly these mountains rise up from the ground. You can get really high if you need to. And if the viewport isn't moving fast enough, I can move the camera speed. And so that I can fly around a little quicker. And I'm just adding in this mountain range. And ultimately, everyone's land is going to have a body of water. So I'm going to make sure that I have like a watertight little perimeter here to have our water and our cadavers. Cool. So that's fine. Looks good. It has a little island in the center. If I went too far on some of this stuff, you can always use a bunch of other tools. You can smooth things out. Right? This just gradually takes away some of the jagged edges. You can flatten. I can click wherever I want to, and it flattens it off. Like if I want to make a road, right? So that could be like a street. Keep it flat. I'll keep it a little bit more organic. So I'm going to press up. If I go up too far, if I hold down Shift, it goes back down. So then I'm like reverse painting. And all this will be recorded on the screen. So I give you guys links to documentation. You can simulate erosion. You can simulate erosion over time. You can add in different like PNG shapes to have noise. So you can do a lot of stuff, or you can just kind of in detail paint your stuff. Great.
Hey Todd,
Hmm.
are you recording with OBS?
Yes.
I think you might just be recording the viewport instead of the whole editor.
I am recording the entire screen.
Oh, it's the whole thing?
Yeah.
Okay, my mistake. I'm sorry. I just saw the my bad.
No problem. But it's always good to check. If I had ever did that, I would always just re-record the demo for you guys so you'd have it. I wouldn't leave you
Okay,
hanging.
thank you.
No problem. So we've now sculpted a world that's sufficient for me. Let's go ahead and add in some atmosphere and some lights and make it look a little bit more like a real world. So I'm going to go out of this mode for right now, back to regular select mode, and let's start working with this. You see that I have, these are things that are built into the engine. This is why the engine is such a large size. It has a lot of things like lights and geometry that you can grab and put in here. There are a couple that you can use for your atmosphere. They can be like visual effects. Like you see, I have skies and clouds and fog. Also under lights, there are really important things like the directional light, like we put in here, so we can see some definition. And then other things like skylight bounces off whatever the sky color is. So there's a lot of different things, and there's a lot of different workflows. There's this really new thing called sun and sky that actually gives you like atmospheric fog, and you can actually create entire planets with. So there's a lot of things to consider. I'm going to make some a little straightforward just so we can get going. So we need to have an atmosphere. Let go. We have sky atmosphere. And that's not what I wanted. That's the other one. Let's go ahead and add in atmospheric fog. There we go. So now we have a little bit of an atmosphere. And then we can add in maybe some little height fog, right? So now we get a little depth, right? We can see as we get further away from items, they add a little bit of fog. That's a really nice effect. You can kind of bump that up, right? It's a little foggier. If I just drag, it says it only goes to 0.05, but I can actually override it and say, like, I want to make it completely foggy, right? I can't see a thing. Right, so you can make your nice creepy lake with using this height fog. Right? I can barely see in front of me, or we can dial it down to something a little bit more reasonable right here. There are some other things that I can add in, like so I was going to add in a skylight. That just brightens everything up a little bit, adds it in that global illumination, little subtleness. Right, it's a way of just adding in overall lighting to your stuff, but it seems to be pretty dramatic. And let's see, what else do I want to add in? There's also something called the, let's see if this right here, BP Skysphere. So this is built in the engine as well, and I'm going to drag this in. So the BP Skysphere, and I might even be able to hide the atmospheric fog, is a whole dynamic cloud system. And I can make it reference that directional light I already put in. And now you see we have all these clouds. And this is what I was talking about earlier in the presentation, that like Unity, you have to build everything, you have to earn it. Like this is an incredibly complicated blueprint that we just get to have automatically, that is a day-night cycle. I think that it's even running in real time, even without hitting play. So like I think the sun will set after a while. I'm not 100% sure. So I remember I had to hook up the directional light, and that my directional light is now my sun. To even prove that's the case, I'm going to find that light, and which was the directional light, and I'm going to double click on it to find it. There it goes. There it is. And if I rotate it, which is, here's your widgets for moving, rotation, and stretching, which is also for shortcut W, E, and R. I'm going to rotate it. And you see it has this little arrow pointing kind of down. That's the way the sun is setting. That's the way the shadows are right now. If I were to rotate this, you see the shadows on the land? Here, I'll move it up so you can see it better. You see how the shadows on the land will change with the direction of the sun. right? That's cool. But the clouds aren't changing, right? It should be, if the sun is underneath the earth, it should be like midnight or something like that, right? Like this, if the sun was facing up here, it would be down way below us. The one thing you have to do to get the sky to update is go back to that Skysphere and say refresh material. And now it's nighttime and there's actually stars out, which is easier to see if I hide some of that fog. You see how there's stars, and you can see it's a sunset. All right, so it's fun to play with. These things are all kind of interrelated to each other. The fog was maybe a little bit too much to be able to see the sunset. I could bring it down and make it a little bit more available to us. There you go. And that Skysphere has all sorts of details in it that we can mess around with, like the brightness of the stars. All right, we can bring those out. The cloud speed at which it's moving. Star brightness is not really changing. Maybe to say, oh, that's sun brightness. Sorry, star brightness is right here. Right, so now it's like a really starry night. Cool. So we're building these are worlds. Maybe I don't want nighttime. You know, maybe it's a little still more sunsetty. So double click, come back to that light, and bring it down just a little bit. Have a little bit of sun peeking through at dusk. Come back to my Skysphere and refresh. And so up there, it's a little bit less bright. A little bit more of a sunset. So play around with that. So let's go ahead and place some things within the world. Actually, I want to bring the sun up a little bit. Let's make it daytime, so you see some sun. And refresh that material. There we go. Now we see a sun setting, long shadows, all in real time. Great. But our thing down here is still good. So let's place a couple actors, but we're going to first deal with our limitations. I said I want you to build an entire world out of starter content only. And how do we add starter content? Well, it's one of the options when you build a new map, but it is also can be added in later on. I could say add or import, feature or content, and then I can bring in this starter content. You don't want to, normally I don't bring in starter content because it's like 600 megabytes of bloat on the project, but for us that's all we're using on this project, so let's go ahead. It brings in a couple of basic particle systems and materials and things like doors and hallways and stuff like that. So I want you to try to create your world based on your brainstorming only out of these primitives and things that are in part of this starter content folder. You also have primitive objects that are in your basic tab, right? I have cubes and I have spheres and cylinders and all that kind of stuff too. Right, so you have cube that can be rotated and stretched and squashed. And just bring it into the world. If I hold down Alt, I can duplicate, make a few. There they are on my outliner. I can select them all, Alt, make a few. So here's like some sort of, here's my grid Stonehenge right here. I'm not so interested in this white material, this base shape material, all 9 of them. I want to make them a different material. So in the starter content, I do have a folder called materials. Also, I can filter and just show me every material. And I could turn that off and on to drill down and just find materials. And this is a really easy way to find levels. If you have a bunch of asset packs put in there together and they're not side by side, you can just say, show me all the levels. So with this selected, I can say, do I want it to be like a stone, like they're man-made? Or do I want it to be a little bit more rough, like they're more natural? All right, it's to taste. Let's go ahead and say rock. So kind of stretched the wrong way. Maybe we just want a more plain one. Let's make them chrome. All right, that's kind of cool. And let's go back to the exponential high fog. And there's one other cool setting that's kind of a newer one, and you can add in actually volumetric fog, which makes it just a little a little bit more interesting, and it plays with the lights really nicely. And I highly recommend turning it on. See how it just adds a little bit more depth into there, and then go ahead and bring out the scale, right? So now we have like this even more kind of fog. I can even go back to my my regular fog density and bring it down a little bit. And go back to volumetric. Yeah, just play with all these little things. You can definitely look up, but look at that. Look how it plays the light. Isn't that awesome? You get some really great shots there. And we can also bring in our own other lights. The main lights are directional, which we already put in. It doesn't matter where it is. It just matters what the rotation is. We've already shown that. The exact opposite are point lights. It doesn't matter what the rotation is. It only matters what the position is. Right? And they have a fall off. That sphere is kind of like as far as they can reach. Right? We can put these here. And maybe there's, you know, a light on top of the one in the center. All right, there's great reflections going on, and there you go. This is there. Also, there is rectangular lights. Usually pair these with windows to be like light streaming in through your window. And then a spotlight is just like a theatrical spotlight. It has a cone, and that cone has its own fall off. Right, we go over the details. It has its own color, its own brightness, and it has its own the radius, how far it goes, the outer cone, the inner cone. And let's bring this over. And this could be like a street light that I haven't made yet, but this is how you do a street light. It's off to the side. All right, see the shadows moving. That. Great. So those are some ideas for how you place actors. But what if we really want to paint some actors like we were painting our landscape? That's where you get to the foliage tool. If we go back up here to the modes, there's foliage. And basically it says drop foliage here. Foliage are static mesh actors. They are meshes, they're assets. I can filter by those. Let's say static mesh. And then we could think, what are some logical things to paint on a landscape? Well, normally it's things like bushes. There's a bush. Or it's things like rocks. There's a rock. So those are the things you'd kind of add in. Right, a bush. And then, but in our world, we also have things like statues. And things like sconces. Doesn't really matter. And each one has its own properties. You can put in here. You can say, how dense is this? Do I want the bushes to be more dense than the statues? Do you want it to align to the angle of the incline, or do you want to have it independent? Do you want to have some sort of scaling? Do you want it to be kind of like it can be scaled anywhere between 1 and 2, right? I want these sconces to be much bigger. I want it to be 10 big, right? So we can just make all these different factors in and say, let's go ahead and paint them in. So I click. There we go. We just painted a whole bunch. Right? My radius was 512. That's how big it is. And it was 0.5 density. That was pretty darn intense. I'm going to undo that. And let's take away the density and say 0.1. Now paint it on. Right? It's a little more barren. Let's make it a little bigger. And let's just paint in a whole section. Boink. That's maybe a little crazy, but let's make it 0.01. Boink. A little sparser. And these are just called instanced. They don't have any collisions. They don't have any physics properties. They're just being kind of a render trick. So they're not really it's not that big of a performance hit. All right. So I've now, yep.
I also have a quick question.
Mm-hmm.
When I paint them, like the object doesn't really show up. It all looks like glass. Like kind of look like cauliflower. I don't know why.
Um, I don't know. We'll take a look at that. Definitely sign up for the office hours to try them out. Maybe it's just the assets you're looking at. I'm gonna so that gets rid of these foliage. Now you can always like select some. You can select individual ones. You can delete individual ones and clean it up. You also have just an erase button. If like for instance I want to probably put a lake in here. I want to get rid of everything that's in the lake so it's not poking out of my water. And let's go ahead and bring in some water. Which would just be a plane, right? It's just a plane that's facing the right direction. Let's go ahead and make it a little bit bigger. We could do it manually like that, or I could type it in that I want to be 100, about 100, and you don't have to do the Z because the Z is vertical. There we go. That gets us somewhere. Bring it up. Bring it down. Why can't we see it? Because it's the world grid material too. Oh, it's upside down. Cool. Oh, that was not the way to do it. That's the way to do it. So now it's right side up. And let's see if we have water in here. We do indeed have some lake water. Give that a second to start computing. And let's make these a little bit bigger. And, this is now technically kind of the end of the class. So if anyone wants to go ahead and leave, that's completely fine. I will see you guys next week, or if you sign up for office hours. But I am going to forge ahead. There we go. So now we have our lake. That's not as dramatic as I want. Maybe ocean. There, so that's weird. I don't know why it's scaled weird. We won't deal with that for right now. Cool. And just make it the right size and the right location so that it fits into your lake. Maybe bring it down a lot. There we go. Got some islands. Our lake. It's a very subtle, calm lake. All right. So we have our lake, but obviously we don't have any grass. So let's make our first material, and we'll do something that's kind of fun. We'll make a blended material. I'm going to look at my materials folder. Actually, I'm going to make my own folder. So this is some of the content from my template. This is the starter content. We're going to talk a little bit about style guide. We're going to create our own content. Nope, not there. Edit. Redo. I'm going to make a folder at the root. This one's going to be called assets. So this is how we actually spell it the right way. Cap lock. Cap lock. There we go. Oh well, for the rest of the semester, assets will be spelled like that. And inside of assets, we're going to say new folder and make one for materials. And let's create a new material. All right, this will be called M underscore landscape. Using a M, prepending an M is called style guide. It's all materials be done this way so that we can find them easily. And then we see our first node-based editor, which is landscape node. We're not going to do much here because I don't want to go too far with this stuff, but I want to show you is that we can take two images and kind of blend between them. I want to find rocks and I want to find grass. So I'm going to go to my textures folder here, and I'm going to find moss. Sounds good because it's lakey. And then how about let's see, not metal. That want to be rocks. I can always search here, and I can use smooth granite. How about that? Smooth granite and moss. Now I have two selected. I'm just going to drag them in. There they are. And we have grass and rock. And I want to blend between the two. I'm going to paint them. So let's see. Let's say that's called a height blend. Height blur. No. Let's just look for the word blend. Landscape layer blend. And we want to have two. Right? And this one's going to be called moss. And this one's going to be called rocks. And as I update that text, you see this node updates. Let's plug in the RG and the B, meaning the color from one, plug in the color from the other, and then into the base color. I think it's supposed to be weight blend. It could be alpha blend, but let's do weight blend for right now. And that's done. I'm going to save and let this compile. And you'll see right there, that's one of those things where if you have a slower computer, this could take a little while for these shaders to compile. We come back to our landscape, select on it. It has a place for us to put that material. There we go. It's on there. It's going to turn everything dark. Let's come back to our modes and go into the mesh painting. I think it's mesh painting. Maybe it's landscape and paint mode. There you go. And you see that we have our two landscape blends right there. And I have like a paint tool, right? I can kind of paint between them. For some reason, though, we have to create some data. First, we have to like kind of this. I find this an arbitrary step, but just know that these right now are not referencing any data on the hard drive. We need to save it into our folder, into our assets. So just say create the info for it, and it is a weight blended layer. Let's come into these textures, press materials, and say that, and weight blended. Great. So by default, it's made everything moss. And so I can select on rocks. I select on rocks. And I should be able to paint some rocks on. Right? And so the same things apply. Fall off, strength. I can paint just a little bit of rocks. Right? Just a little bit. Just a light bit. It can have a fall off. Right? It can have a dramatic fall off. Or not dramatic fall off. So I'm just like, again, 3D Photoshop, just painting in some rock textures to get some differentiation in there. So like maybe it's rocky in here on this side. All right, so this is how you blend between different layers and maybe paint a road in and add different effects. Maybe you can find a material or a texture that looks wet or something like that right here, so it could be wet around the edges of the lake. And that addresses making our own material for landscape. And of course, I just did two. You can do tons and tons of textures. We're going to get more materials later on. I don't want to make it too complicated for now. Just knowing that the materials are there, that's great. I'm going to go ahead and save all. Great. I'm going to save my map, and this is I'll just call it main for right now. And just remember that save all saves everything. Just hit the save current only saves the asset that you're touching right now. So they're two different things that are not connected to each other. Great. So we've done height, fog, and lights, time of day, blends, foliage. Let's make a little bit of our own custom foliage, just to show you that, and then we'll be done. So I'm going to go back to my modes tool and go to foliage. And we saw that we have, we can just add things here and paint them on. But there's other ways of doing it. For instance, one thing is, every time I add this asset, do I have to go back and change the way I want it? I always want it to be less dense. And then I want it to be I want it to be aligned to normals. I want to be angled when it's on an incline. Every time I add in this bush, I would have to do that again, right? So I delete it, and then no. Or if I add it again, turn it off and add it again, won't let me do that. Anyway, those things aren't saved. So another way of doing this is saying add foliage type. You can create a static mesh foliage, and make a new folder for static meshes. And this one can be our new instance foliage. And now, if I find it, I can add in the thing I want, and then I can keep these settings so every time I add it in, it's there for me. So that's a cool way of always having everything the way you want it, and every time you add it in, it is there exactly the way you like it. Cool. So now this tree is in there. I'm going to paint it. I don't want to paint the other ones, and I have my tree the way I like it. Come back up. Take away this crazy size, and we can just like paint a couple trees, but make it more dense. No trees. I wonder what I did. Let us find that tree. If I just threw this in the world, well, let me do that. What if I... What is the scale of this tree? There it is. It's a nice tree. Sometimes you just need to save. Paint. I'm in erase mode. Let's go to fill. No, paint. Now I'm painting. Sorry, I was in erase mode. I'm back to paint mode, so I can paint a couple of these trees. Make the intensity and the size bigger. There we go. We've added a couple trees. Obviously, that was a little wonky. Sorry about that. Cool. A little bigger. Let's move on to the next thing. Just because we've done blueprints, I want to... Density. Sounds like it's painting. I'll come back to that. I'll figure that out. But the one other item I want to look at is, we've already looked at blueprints. We can make our own actor of foliage as well. I'm going to go into here. I'm going to go into static meshes, and this is going to be called a actor foliage 1. And then the interface of that is that it wants to look for a blueprint. And from our homework, we've done blueprints. It's just a good way of combining things together, right? We put a flame on our stick so that we have a torch, right? So I'm going to make an actor. I'm going to call it BP torch. Let's go ahead and get out of this mode so it's more performative. And then in here, I want to put in basically a cylinder. So that is a cylinder. Make it a little bit more narrow. And then I'm just going to put a particle system on top of it. That's going to be our fire. Cool. So I've made this blueprint right here that's a wonky torch. And then if I go into my actor foliage, I can choose that torch. BP torch. Is that what I called it? BP torch, yeah. Hit save. And then what I meant to do actually was to put this in a folder called blueprints. So I'll say blueprints and move it in here. Not copy it, I want to just move it. And let's go ahead and save all to make sure we don't lose anything. All right, so now if I go back to our foliage, we could have a BP torch. Hopefully this one paints on. Great. So I'm painting on torches now. That's pretty cool. Oh, look at that sun. That's awesome. Alright, so this can be any combination of things. So we can use a static mesh, or we can create our own combinations of things. You could make a weird cylinder box-based cow to fill in and make a field of them using these primitive assets. And what's cool is that if I go in and I change the torch, and let's say I want to make it like a lot taller, and move it up, and I hit save, I think it will propagate through. Yeah, so now all of them are taller. Alright? But I think torches would always be facing up, so let's not align to normal. Oh, if I painted some more, they wouldn't be aligned to normals. They'd be just all straight up. Right? So that's not aligned to normal, that's all straight up. Cool, so we can have a combo of all those things. Everything's looking pretty awesome. Let's see, I think that was pretty much it. So a couple things about this world. You see I have a text here that says lighting needs to be rebuilt. That is because, we got this paint mode, that is because, wow, look at that, it's amazing. That is because we need to bake in the lighting. So lighting has properties where if it's set to be static or stationary, you can bake it in so it actually becomes part of the texture, and that's why, and it becomes more performative. But if we want to, and we want to use more, we want to make something more dynamic, we can actually switch it to movable, and then it's computing shadows in real time. But what I do have is I have this like point light right here that needs to be baked in. And if I can double click on it and go to it, I want to make sure that like its light, its luminance right here is always basically embedded into the textures around it. So let's go ahead and find a funny sounding thing called a light mass importance object. And it's basically saying we're going to bake light, but only bake light in this area. I don't want you to bake light for 1,000,000 miles, just for this one world. So let's do 10,000. Let's do 50,000 by 50,000. It could be really big, but it's better than trying to bake lights for what it thinks is like infinite, like for the end of time. Or at least saying no, the world is just this big. And I don't know if you can see it, but there's these yellow lines for the light mass. And then we want to do a lighting bake. So build lighting only. My lighting quality is only at preview. If I want to make it really nice for my homework, I can say let's go for production level and say build lighting only. And now it's opening up this thing called the swarm agent, which is a great name. And if you open up the swarm agent, you can actually watch the process happening. Let's see, I can't see the chat window, but let's see. Let's move. There we go. If you want to shrink down all these assets all at once, we'd have to do some investigation on already placed stuff. That would might be easier just to kind of paint different ones. You know, you can have multiple of the same assets, and I could have these be the big ones that are less dense, and then have this constant there again potentially, and have it smaller. So you kind of have to kind of plan around that, and that's why it's always good to sketch ahead of time. So right now my lighting is being built. If I want to look at that happening, I have my swarm agent, I double click it, and we're actually looking at this process of photons being emitted and photons being collected, and basically it's bouncing light everywhere and baking in lights and shadows. This is definitely CPU dependent. The more cores you have, the faster as light bake will happen. And in general, it starts off very slow. You think it's never going to happen, but then it will finish. This is where the cigarette smokers can go take a cigarette break. I also know another trick to get rid of this red text, And I don't know if you can see it, is that underneath it says disable all screen messages. I can just hit tilde and say disable all screen messages. And I probably misspelled it. Disable. Oh no, it went away. Nope, it didn't go away. Disable all messages. It says disable all screen messages. And they go away. And I can't tell you how many times I've put pieces through festivals where we couldn't bake the lighting, and we just said, hide the error anyway. It's not that performant, and it doesn't look as good, but we're up and running without the horrible text right there. So last thing, and then I'll let you guys go, or I'll let myself go, is that we want to take screenshots. We want to put those on our blog. The screenshot tool in the game engine is super awesome in that it could do a multiplier. So we're going to do hero shots. Heroes are, if you think about when you see heroes, usually the camera is lower than the hero, and it looks up at them, giving them a sense of majesty. Oh, it's going to show us GoPro hero. That's hilarious. That ruins it. Usually like this is a hero shot. You look up and it gives them more power, more dominance. So let's take some hero shots of our world. Here I'm kind of looking at the sun, getting those God rays in there, and that's one frame. And I'm going to say down here, high resolution screenshot. And then right now my monitor's 1920 by 1080. The viewport's probably 1280 by 720. So if I want to have a 4K image, I would multiply it by a multiplier. Don't use anything bigger than 8, otherwise you might crash your computer. Or I could crop a section out, but I'm just going to hit play. It's going to take a picture, and it gives you a link right here to where to find the screenshot. Everything in your project as your screenshot is in your saved folder. So go to your root, go to saved, go to screenshots, Windows, and then there is my screenshot. And I can zoom in way high, and I just get aliasing when I get there. So you can do some like high poster quality images using the screenshot tool. And I'm not even hitting play. In fact, did it show the widgets? Cool, it didn't even show the widgets. If you're not hitting play and you want these things to go away, like the widgets and the lines and stuff, just hit the G button and it makes it go away. And you don't even have to hit play. So let's find one more shot. There we go. And we will take a screenshot. Cool. So put these screenshots on your blog post so we can see some of the best features of the world you build. And that is, we'll take a look at my sheet. Yeah, that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, of course, Slack me. And the syllabus is to build out your world. Yeah, any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. How do you take like a quick, like short video of what you did, like just like of your camera panning or something, or is that like more complicated?
It is, and it isn't. I mean, there's not a quick one button press thing. You would have to get into what's called a cinematic, and that's just basically laying out a path. And we're going to get into that in a week or next week, actually. For now, use your phone if you don't care, if you're just trying to get the idea out, or like I'm doing, use OBS or any of the other screen recording software. The trick is to hit F11 and it goes full screen.
Okay, so and then the image, are those like high quality? Those are like HD quality images, the screenshots that you took?
The screenshots are however the multiplier is, so they're probably around 4K.
Okay.
But if you have like a 4K screen, you go full screen, take a screenshot. I can hold up tilde one more time, say high res shot, and then say multiplier of 8. That's going to chug along. So now it's doing an HD times 8 image, so I guess, is that 8K? I'm not sure. It's taking a little while to think about it. But when it gets done, we'll see how much larger that file is. Here we go, escape, F11. And if we go back to that folder, we'll see that this new one is like, it's 127 megabytes versus 10 megabytes. So what is that resolution?
Okay. All right. Cool. Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, so I just took a 15,000 pixel by 8,000 pixel screenshot of my world. So I could go out and go put on a billboard, and it could be super, super big. Super good resolution.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was curious about. All right. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. So this is a great way of prototyping worlds and taking great screenshots and adding it to your art and your design. Great. So, there's always more to do, but feel free to explore from the links that I sent you.